Machine coding interviews for front-end developer. Like we as a front-end developer, we used to write lot of code day and night, right? But still, we are not able to crack the machine coding round most of the time. What's the reason behind that? We'll be covering. So, welcome back to Check the System Design series. I am Chirag Goyal. We'll be talking about what actually matters in a machine coding round. What are the tips and tricks in order to crack a machine coding round? So, keep watching. Generally what happens, we get a machine coding problem statement, like it's 1 hour or maybe 2 hour problem statement. How do you start? It's like tick tick tick, HTML body, your code starts, or npm installed, directly code your start, right? Or you start with writing your function and then you start with that, right? But do you really think that is the right approach in order to head towards any of the machine coding round? Because what are the things that actually matters is the planning for your machine coding round, and we are going to discuss how you should plan and what are the things that goes into the planning and what are the, you can say, priority thing in terms of the planning, right? First thing first, read the problem statement very carefully. People do underestimate most of the time, like while I'm traversing, why I'm navigating to the problem statement or implementing, I will keep on asking the problem statement, if any, right? That's strongest myth and the challenges of the most of the folks, because they realize the complexity once they are in the mid of the interview, right? So it's good you read the problem statement carefully and ask your doubt with the person who have shared you the problem statement in starting itself. Although if you have few doubts, you can ask in the mid of the interview, but most of the doubt you should ask in the starting, so that you can plan and you can have a thought process in which direction you want it to head, which is very important. With this, I also wanted to highlight, sometimes in the problem statement itself you will have a clear parameter which says that these are the must have and these are good to have. Always try to focus on what matters to you much in the interview, because there are so many things you may be very talented in, you can actually cover your must have, good to have, but you have to remember the clock is ticking, right? And you have to complete whatever you have to do in the given time interval. So don't try to become very smart, always try to focus more on the must have and the code completion with the quality, and then move ahead with the good to have. For that, sometimes it is not given or provided by the interviewer. Do ask and clarify what are the things that are going to matter and what are the things our interviewer is expecting you to complete. This is very, very important. Focus on this. Third thing, people underestimate it very heavily, especially the front end developer. What I used to do a lot, what matters is the data model. Sometimes they will ask you to have a mock API. Sometimes they will ask you to use any online platform, or they will provide you, you can say, the mock APIs, right? Or any APIs. What matters, you should understand your data model, you should understand your data and what protocol basically you are going to use, either that is like GraphQL, REST, whatever you are going to use basically, and how you are going to consume inside your application. If you understand your data well, implementing your code becomes very, very easy. Most of the people face challenges because they don't understand the data model, and they mess up a lot of things while coding. So understand your data model a lot. Then think from a component design. When we say think of a component design, think like, what if there are multiple routes, what are those route basically you need, what are the common pieces that you are going to have. So try to implement those small common pieces as in full flash functionality, and then try to stitch back into, you can say, your section, into your pages, and then finally your routes, right? So try to think in those direction. Don't jump into writing your code in a full flash in the first set as in working. Try to work on small pieces, try to complete and try to fit it back. So that gives you more confident, and that's how basically things works very well. Try to define your services. Why this is important? Because you will have your separation and concern, and you will avoid end up messing a lot of things, right? This is very, very important. Again, if you get time, you have to focus on performance. Like, at least not it per your performance should not be the thought process at the end. Your performance should be a thought process while you are coding. If small things you can do in order to optimize and make more application more performant, do it, but do not invest much time in the performance while you are coding. Consistency is very important. Try to avoid like duplication of your code. If you are writing some styles, can you write a small class which can be used at multiple places? Are you using design system, then can you use the same system, like design system consistency across all of them, right? Are you aware of any of the security? If you can write some small thing, maybe like data validation or some sort of thing, or the validation that you can have in your application, that's are going to have a great boom, right? So accessibility, are you able to think about that? If you can write a small thing like tab, or there are so many things that you can achieve out of box, like by writing a small attribute in order to have the better accessibility. Think about those things, it matters. What matters? So there are 8 parameter, basically you see 8 9 parameter, right? So how to basically prioritize? These are so many things, and within 1 hour or 2 hour, it's very difficult to basically cover all of them. So in your machine coding round, try to focus in this direction. So what I meant by try to cover this part for sure. This is going to add a very heavy evaluation when someone is going to review your code, right? This is going to matter a lot. What is the next set of things that you can actually cover when you are having a discussion after your machine coding round, or you are having a walkthrough? You can cover these part, which is your performance, consistency, security, and accessibility, and you can consider in the same order. So like most of the time, once you are into the like interview after, you can say the machine coding round, when people are having a walkthrough, you will be asked related to the performance, consistency, how you can make some consistency, is there any security concerns, right? And the accessibility. So do take care of these things, and in the same order, this is going to give you a lot benefit. What matters the most in the machine coding interviews, right? First thing first, completion in the approach. What it meant by, so you are given a time slot, right? So 1 hour 2 hours basically, and you have to complete a assignment which is given to you, right? What matters, you should focus on must have, as I shared previously also, right? And second is the quality of code. Why these things matters a lot? Because you have to think as a UI 1 2 3, basically you have to actually, there are certain tasks which are assigned to every sprint, right? And you have to complete it, because there are certain commitments which are given to the external force. If you're not good at coding, if you're not able to deliver the quality, then it is going to have a problem. So that's what the most of the folks wanted to assess in your you can machine coding round. Are you able to deliver in a given certain time, and what is the quality of code, so that the iteration is very less, right? Second, the folder structures matter a lot. What it meant by when we say about the folder structure, you can, there are so many ways, basically there are so many popular pattern, basically use any of the pattern, that is completely okay. You should have a justification why you are using, right? Some people have the flat structure, like you create basically for your commons, right? You create your common, you create your, if you're using action, you can say redux action reducer, you have your component, right? Irrespective of what you're using, you can have other sort of thing. So it's like flat. For one thing, you have one folder, and you keep adding everything related to that inside that folder. This is a flat structure. Similarly, there is something called domain driven approach, where basically, say suppose if you are building a comment related component, everything, its style, basically its state, everything, helper, everything is put inside that particular stuff. This is called you can say domain driven approach. We have MVC, where we call it like model view controller. You have your model separately, your view and your controller separately. We have a view state, where you define your state at one places and all the views at a different places. Similarly, there is another very popular approach which is called the atomic design, where you think from a like designing a very small thing, and finally you combine them in order to make a web page, right? So it's behind the scene, it works on how basically atoms, basically. So you have a atom, then you basically combine, you become a molecule, and then basically you have a component. And similarly, if you have to relate it with the real tech example, you are developing a small, say suppose input field, and finally you are generating a web page altogether, right? So from small atoms to create a bigger thing. This is how it works. Separation of concerns matters a lot. It sees in the interviews, it sees how your thought process, and how you plan basically before writing any piece of code, which is you should always have a single purpose before writing any of the thing. It should be decoupled. Try to not have dependency on lot more thing. Try to reduce lot of dependency, so that it can be pure most of the time. Avoid duplication of your code, which is very important, and most of the time interviewer do like we notice that. Make it extensible. So you cannot think about everything like future use cases, and like 10 years down the line how things are going to be used, but If it is extensible, people can basically come and extend. So are you having those thought process? Mind your own business, which is very important. So when you talk about separation of concern, if you are working on a comment, you don't care about what is happening in the, say suppose, your post section, right? So those are the things that you should be very very mature enough when you are having your separation of concern. Naming convention is again very very this is a small thing, but again most of the interviewer do notice this when you are writing a code. So how you are naming your files and folder basically, right? How you are naming your variables and functions. This is again some good points, right? So what matters is a like, do you really this may not be important in the interviews, but this matters a lot in your actual real examples, real life coding, where most of the people use different product naming convention for the same thing, which ends up messing your conventions and the file name and the code which you write, or the comment basically you write in your code, right? So always try to have the similar product name and the same name. There are certain times which I have faced, basically your product name get evolves multiple times in 1 year or 2 years span. So you will see in your code base itself there are so many terminologies used for the same product, which actually ends up messing a lot of stuff, right? So try to avoid that. So try to have better comments when you write your code and better commit message, right? So these are the some conventions that actually helps and distinguish between a good programmer and coder and a normal person who writes the code, right? Second thing is, when we talk about the modularity, most of the things we have discussed, but still, so first thing first, do not repeat yourself, right? So write it once and use it multiple places, which is important. Think in an atomic fashion. So try to build from very small piece and try to utilize it bigger places, right? Build for near future. Do not build for like a decade ahead. Something will happen and someone will basically use this out of the box and this is going to be stable enough. Most of the time it is not. Decade doesn't works. Near future most of the time it works. So focus on that. Make it extensible, as we said, and try, this is very important, try to communicate to everyone. Again, this may not be directly related to the interview which you are basically appearing for, but this is definitely going to help you in your day-to-day engineering practices. Communicate to everyone if you have built something which is common, or you can say a common service or common thing utility that you have built, so that most of the people are using it. So it becomes easy for you to invest and easy for people to do not create their own version, right? So look for more adoption, which is going to definitely help. What is the next thing? I will be coming towards the design pattern, but before that, let's quickly see what we meant by the data structure and state machine. This is very important in interviews as well, right? Why? You have to understand your data very well. Like if you don't understand your data, you are going to mess up, that is for sure. Try to see what are the APIs, what are the endpoint, what are the input which is required, and what are the output basically which these endpoints are basically giving, those APIs are giving. Try to create your own model basically. If you are using TypeScript or whatever, define your interfaces so that you don't mess up, right? So this is going to speed up your development time, trust me. Next and the most important, invest in your state machine. So state management, basically what I meant by, not machine over here, although it's a good thing. State management is like, either you use any library like Redux, Mobex, whatever you wanted to use, context or anything, right? But try to invest on that. This is going to definitely help you. Last and the very important thing which I'm going to talk about is your design patterns. So when we say design patterns, this is very important and very underestimated thing basically. But most of the time you will see most of the people are actually consuming and using it. So, okay, let me quickly fit this up. Okay. Okay. So when we say design patterns, it's like there are multiple design patterns and most of the design patterns you may be familiar with. Okay, it's still not visible. Then let me quickly fix this up. Okay, so yep. Yeah, so talking about the design pattern, most of the design pattern you may be already familiar with, like factory method, right? Abstract method, or like observable pattern. This is very important and most famous, and people might have used singleton pattern, right? There are so many design patterns, and we'll be covering these design patterns in a separate video altogether. We'll be diving and we will be going into the depth. But meanwhile, just explore. You are using it. Maybe you haven't thought in terms of which design pattern you are using right now. छोटी पर मोटी बात है. This is my favorite one because at the end, whatever stories, what are the techniques, what are the stuffs that I have told you, it's going to help you. What matters is this. Most of the time, people do not focus on these areas which I'm going to talk about. Like time management is your key, right? Dude, you may be very good. If any problem statement is given, you will like spend your day and night in order to complete and you will get it done. But in interviews, your time is ticking, right? You have to make sure you are able to complete whatever the assignment is given in that particular duration. So focus on time. Have a eye on your watch, which is very very important. And do not panic, obviously, because in the starting 15 minutes you are not able to write more because you are planning, because that planning is going to give you a lot more benefit. So do not panic about if you are rushing around the time, but have an eye on your clock, which is very important. Ready to work from scratch. What it meant by, most of the time we are very much familiar and equipped with getting some bootstrap ready and started working on top of it, right? Because we do not write the code from scratch in most of the day-to-day life, right? So but in interviews you will be asked to write the code from the scratch, so be ready with that. And most important, be ready writing your code on the Google Doc instead of any ID. Interviews like Google interviews, like lot more companies, basically they will give you a whiteboard where you have to write a code, or like Google Doc sort of thing. Sometimes you may be lucky enough, you will get some ID, online ID, where you can get those shortcuts and the autocomplete sort of thing. But be ready, there can be scenarios which you are asked to write your plain on the whiteboard, where you don't get any syntax highlighter or autocomplete sort of thing, right? So you may feel a very different word altogether when writing on such a platform. But yes, this is very important. Focus on that. Brush up on the very common DOM API and the CSS property, because most of the time what happens, we try to focus on the complex pieces and we actually end up messing, oh, how to filter or how to map certain things, what are the arguments which are present, or how like add event listener, or how to create a DOM altogether, right? Those are very small things. Sometimes CSS property, oh, does it have, should I write a text underscore, or it is box model, or like what it is, right? Position, which position does what, we mess up a lot of small thing, right? So focus on those common DOM APIs and the CSS property, which will help you to speed up. With this, although you may miss out certain things, you cannot remember all the functions in the method, it's okay to Google out those things. Don't Google out, if say suppose we are given an autocomplete, how to design an autocomplete. Dude, that is not going to work, right? But yeah, if you end up like forgetting any of the properties or any of the method and what are the APIs which are exposed for that method, it's completely okay. You can Google it out. You can ask your interviewer, like, I'm just skipping, can I Google it out? And most of the people are okay about the syntax and the APIs basically, or the methods which are provided, because in our day to day no one remembers everything. We Google it out and basically we see, oh, these are the properties which are exposed by this particular endpoint, or these are the parameters which are expected by this particular endpoint, which is completely okay. Final and the most, in your machine coding round, whatever, how good you are in communication, what is going to matter is your code will matter more than your communication. And this is one and very important round in which, if you are very good programmer and developer, you are going to outshine, right? Because your code is going to speak more than what you are going to speak. So be ready with that, and with that, best wishes, and go and crack a machine coding round like anyone. You have done with your code, right? Now it's time for a submission. So you are done. Now it's time to submit. What is going to basically matter is like code, you will be having a code walkthrough after the machine coding round, right? Most of the time you will be showcasing the how it is basically working. In most of the interviews, in most of the company, you get this opportunity. In some companies you have to just submit and someone will basically revert back if you are selected or not. But in most of the companies or drive, basically when you go, you submit your code, you will be asked and you will be called in order to basically have a discussion and walk through the code which you have done. So that's a biggest time where if you have messed up something in your code, you can cover it up, right? To some extent you can cover it up. So this is very, very important. So never give up if you have messed up something in your code and you are not able to write or deliver the 100% thing which you were expecting in the machine coding, like while coding machine coding round, right? So now, so code walkthrough for machine coding round, why it is important, try to focus on that. Be vocal and walk through your code from the bootstrap and init app. What it meant by is most of the people jump into the component or a particular route or a particular functionality and start showcasing this is how I have done. No, so it may take a couple of more seconds, but always start from your bootstrap and init where your application actually start. Either it is index.html or whatever it is. Try to focus from that. It showcase you have a in-depth knowledge. It's not like you are working on a big project, but you are working on some module altogether, right? This is going to help you a lot. Now coming to highlight your approach, why this is important. You have done something, right? You have to showcase what are the thought process basically you are having while basically you're coding or writing your application, right? The code for your application. This is very important. Always highlight your approach. Focus on challenging area. So obviously you may not be given 30 minutes in order to explain what you have done. You may be given like 5 minutes or 10 minutes hardly in order to walk through your code. So focus on the challenging areas, although you are going to cover from the bootstrap, but try to put more weightage on the challenging stuff, either that is async thing or any design pattern or anything that you have basically used or any complex thing that you have used, your data structure, what's the thought process behind modeling that. So focus on those challenging area. This is going to definitely help you a lot, right? This showcase like you are not just a person who are given a particular task and you are just like heading towards the completion. You are also putting your thought process in order to develop in a far better way, and you are thinking about the future also. This is very important thing which is going to help. Talk about your plans. This is what I said. Even if you were not able to complete your 100% must have, so you could actually discuss, if given like 5 minute, 10 minute or 30 minute, I could have completed these things, and this is what my approach was, and this is the direction I would be heading. Maybe you can talk about these are the function which I have already used, I have to just consume them. Or you can tell about these are the components basically I have already created. It's more about I have to just consume. I didn't got the time in order to do that because of anything, right? You can talk about those things, which is very, very important. Again, this is the last, but this is the very important thing which helps you to create the long lasting impact into the interviewer's mind, which is talk about the other possible solutions in order to solve this problem. Like what are the similar options that you have and why you opted for this particular solution. That shows you are a senior person and you are baked engineer, right? Where you know a lot of stuff, where you are able to decide this is going to help you, maybe because of any reason, maybe because of time constraint, maybe because you opted this because you felt this is the right approach and this worked in your past, right? Highlight those things, and this is going to definitely create a mark in the memory of the interview. So note it down. Your walkthrough now, the cross questioning will start, where a person wanted to actually evaluate how much depth you have, right? So most of the time you will get this opportunity in any of the machine coding round, where people will be having like 10 to 15 minute reserve in order to like talk about the certain complex things in the code which you have written. And obviously when you have done your code walkthrough, this is going to definitely give you a benefit. What are the different areas mostly the questions are asked for? One is the performance. What are the popular questions that are going to be asked in terms of the performance? Like, do you see any performance issue in your code? Why this is asked? Because if this sort of thing is asked and you are able to highlight, I have approached certain thing which is not performant enough, these are the different ways. It may be your event delegation, it can be any best practices, right? Anything that is talked about, like avoiding re-rendering, it can be anything. Like so many things are there. If you are able to talk about them, then interviewer understand, because of the time you are not able to do that, but you have actually a good knowledge around that, right? So again, other popular questions are, what are the other performance, you can say web performance optimization you have worked upon, right? Anything related to your network layer, anything related to the build process, anything related to the code standards that helps to have a better performance, right? Those kind of things can be asked. Like, have you faced any issues related to the event delegation or the closure handling, right? These questions can be asked. Anything which is related to the framework related, right? Like anything like use callback, use memo, if you are in a React, right? It can be any sort of performance issues related to the framework that can be asked. So try to focus and brush up on all those things. This is definitely going to help. Maybe related to the debounce or related stuff, right? Throttle kind of stuff, or use animation frame sort of thing can be asked, right? So what are the other things that can be asked? And maybe person can ask you related to any of the state machine library that you have worked on and why you opted for. Like, why are you managing your state in such a fashion? Do you see any performance issue if you are going to use any other way of managing your state? So these are some of the popular questions which are related to the performance. Do look up into that, brush up on those things, and when you are going to present these things, make sure you have already gone through your code and you know certain areas which is going to help you. Consistency, it's more about can you make your code more modular, right? You might have duplicated certain things, or you might not have written a well-formed thing. So just peep into your code and find out certain areas which can help you to make this code more modular or consistent, right? Think about, if I can move down this thing to some utility, or I can build some common component, this can be used, right? Think about those areas, and this is definitely going to make a important mark in terms of the interviews, right? Some security thing definitely can be asked. What are those? Like, have you worked on XSS attack, right? Have you ever worked on preventing on the you can say CSRF, which is related to you can say your security foreign resources, right? So then there can be certain questions related to the CORS, right? CORS, basically, if you are using your website from a different domain altogether, do you see any challenges? So those kind of thing do take care of, and this is going to definitely, people do ask some of these things when you are actually going through your machine coding now. And definitely, if you have used certain things like tab index or area label sort of thing in order to have a better accessibility, so or anything related to your reader, right? So if you are able to highlight those things, then like interviewer think like you have actually worked for a large scale application where you have worked in depth related to this stuff. This is definitely going to give you a benefit a lot. So be prepared before actually going for one-to-one discussion after your machine coding round, because these are the questions which are definitely going to be asked in one way or the other. So focus on that and invest some time before, and just go through your code, which is very, very important. I hope you like this video of how to crack front-end machine coding round. Yeah. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe this channel, and do let me know your interviewer experiences in the comments. So keep watching Chakde System Design.